Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to another joint meeting of the Board of Selectmen and the Budget Board. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 6:05 p.m. Call the Selectmen to order. Barbara, would you?
Likewise, the Budget Board is in order. We have 8 members present and 2 missing. 10 members present and 2 missing.
Okay. Well, the Selectmen are all present and are accounted for.
I don't know about accounting.
Ever present. Nobody's AWOL. All right, would you like to get us started this evening, Laurie? I put my phone on silent.
Yes, tonight we are going to review some committees and outside agencies. So we are going to start on page 87 with the Conservation Commission. So I don't see anybody from the Conservation Commission here, so I'll just give an overview. The Conservation Commission has a very small budget. Last year it was larger because we did have an intern that was shared between the Conservation Commission and the Healthy Beaches program with water quality testing. And so this year there is no intern assigned to the Conservation Commission, so we are asking for the $1,350. That includes anything they may want to do relative to public education, which is where their efforts normally go. Conservation Commission in the past has done projects like the solar panels here. They've also done the Lawns to Lobster program, and right now they're working on pesticides and fertilizers and the impact to the environment. And as part of our environmental plan, I've asked them to be engaged in talking to us about a climate action plan. So does anybody have any questions about the Conservation Commission budget? So if not, then we're going to go to page 133 to KEMS, which is Kennebunkport Emergency Medical Service. And Jim Stockman is here to talk about the KEMS budget. So you'll see the request amount on page 133, but then on 134 you'll see a summary of the KEMS budget.
Thank you. I have with me tonight Joe Carroll, our Chief of Operations, and so if you're worried about the ambulance being in the back there, it's there because Joe is on duty currently. Once again, KEMS comes before you to ask for an appropriation to assist us as a nonprofit organization providing emergency medical service to the town of Kennebunkport. We're very proud to tell you that as of May 29th, it will be officially our 40th year of providing this service. When it first started out, it was all volunteer. We're working diligently on our history and reading names of people who first started. It's quite an endeavor to find all the people who have helped. Over the years, we've had to change our business model. We are now totally payroll driven. The only volunteers left are the board. In this payroll-driven organization, we provide the town with 24/7 paramedic coverage with a driver EMT, and they are down in Cape Porpoise, and we have pretty close to 99.5% coverage at any one time. Of course, nobody cares about this information until you absolutely need it, and then it is absolutely critical. So we have traditionally come before you for money. The operation has changed. The Medicare has changed in terms of what we get reimbursed. So it's getting harder and harder to survive and to pay for the service off of the revenue from services. So we now need to find new streams of revenue. We have just introduced this year a subscription service, of which I'm pleased to tell you that we have just about 100 subscribers, close to bringing in over $20,000. So we're looking at various methods, but we still have to come to you. We originally came to you when we first put our budget together, and we wanted to have 50% of our payroll. Our payroll is somewhere around $350,000 in round numbers. That would equate to about $75,000. That was not possible. This year we received $150,000. We also, in this new budget, we received an additional $5,000, so we're asking the town for $155,000, and that is about 45% of our payroll. We do have a large endowment. We buy an ambulance out of that endowment. We do not come to the voters. We're due to buy a new ambulance within next fiscal year, and that ambulance is budgeted to be around $250,000 fully equipped. So it's not only the vehicle, but it's all of the equipment that is now mandated by the state or the federal government to have an ambulance road ready to help you all out. So that's part of where our endowment goes. The other part of our endowment does pay for this year. We're pulling about $18,000 to help with our operation. So we have money coming in, but we really are at a point where we have to figure out a way to grow our endowment so that we can realize more money to help with our operation, and at the same time to allow the endowment to grow. So the $155,000 is what we're asking for. I did some very quick numbers. I took the 2010 census, and I took our 2017 numbers from the town report, and I said, okay, $175,000 is what we wanted. That equates to about $50 for each person in the population. I looked at the fire department, and it came out to be $112 per person, and I looked at police, that was almost $600. So somebody paying their taxes, getting quite a bargain. Coming for even at the 175, and we're less. And so that's our presentation, and open to questions in terms of what you see before you. And between Joe and I, we have been working together now 3-4 years, and we feel very proud of the fact that we have a really great handle on our numbers. How many people, 50% of our calls are for over 60. This many calls are through, are here in the town that are revenue producing. This many calls are not. So we're really trying to understand where we are, where we're going, because we have to plan for the future.
Yeah, Jim, Dave James. 2 questions. One, you've only had the subscription program out for about a month now? And you said you raised $20,000 already?
Yes, we have.
And you think you'll get some more out of that?
We don't know that. We're hoping to be able to have an article in the town newspaper, I think that's the best term.
Newsletter, yeah.
Newsletter. And we're hoping, because we have a subscription service for seasonal people, we're hoping to see some increase in that time period. Remember, the subscription service is based on a calendar year.
Right.
But the other thing we have to look at is the write-off. We're getting that money in, and we're saying that Medicare, Medicaid your insurance covers so much, and we're writing the rest of that off. And so we're in the midst of working with our accountants to see how we, on the books, how do we account for that? One of the things we need to look at is if you need the ambulance and you're on the subscription service and it comes to your house in a calendar year 6 times, and you paid the $300, I think we lost money. And so we need to look at these numbers, so we need to evaluate the subscription program each year to make sure that it really is an intelligent way. What it's done for us is it's given us our cash flow. Usually our donations start in July, which we'll still be doing, and we get a cash influx from July through December. Now we have a cash influx from January through March so far. So we're hoping that that will help us so we don't have to keep dipping into our endowment, because at some point we have to sell capital. We have to sell stocks. We don't want to do that. Our financial advisors tell us that we should be taking 4% out of it. So it's a very complicated formula here that we're trying to balance.
Yeah, the only thing I worried about was the impact on the fundraising that you do in the middle of the year. People who have signed up for subscriptions, maybe they say, gee, I already gave $150 or $300. Do I want to donate again?
We are carefully monitoring that. Every subscription, we look at who was a donor. And so next year, we would be able to come here to the budget process and to say, we got this many people. We already see maybe 50% of people who never donated to us who are taking subscriptions.
Okay, good.
So we're very carefully monitoring all of those numbers to understand them and to be able to justify when I stand up here next year, if I'm still president of it, but to be able to justify and explain to everybody how we did.
Okay, thank you.
Any other?
Dan,
Someone's hands. Dan?
Dan.
Thank you.
Mine's a little.
Is this on?
Yeah, the green light's on.
Oh, okay. This may not be the appropriate time, but I would like to see the budget board and the selectmen move for $175,000. I'm the only original member of KEMS that's still active for 40 years. And I think I've got a pretty good track record with participation and knowledge of the outfit. And if my numbers are pretty nearly correct, since January the 1st of 2016, we've had about 1,200 calls. 600 and almost 700 are billable. The other roughly 500 were not billable. We had to write off, over that period of time, about $360,000. To me, the additional $20,000 that was figured out by Joe and Jim and the board of directors is money well spent for what this town is getting. And if you go out and look at other towns and the cost to their taxpayers, this town is so far ahead of most anybody that I've ever known that we are far ahead. I would like to see the additional $20,000 that was requested put back on the table. Thank you.
Hey, Dan, I'd like to ask you a question. Why weren't those other ones billable? What was the reason behind not being able to be
I can
billed?
answer that for you, sir.
This is Joe Carroll, he
Joe,
is the
okay,
chief of
great.
operations.
Yeah, he's the appropriate person
Okay.
to ask, to answer the question.
I'll have to bring that a little up to my height. So, I'm Joe Carroll. I've met some of you I haven't. I'm the current chief of operations. I took over in 2016. So to answer your question with that, there are certain types of calls that we go on that if we just go for a lift assist, or we just go to help out somebody that's had a diabetic issue and those aren't transported, the only time that we technically bill for calls is if we transport you to the hospital. A lot of that was based on the law as to what we could bill for and what we couldn't. The billing companies have been working with us a little bit more to be able to bill for better things. Like if I come to your house and say you're a diabetic and your blood sugar's low, and I give you D50 or D10, get your blood sugar up, feed you a peanut butter sandwich, and you say, I don't want to go to the hospital, I'm all set. You have the right to do that. Before, I couldn't charge you for any of that. I couldn't charge you for any of the medications, I couldn't charge you for anything. Now I can. We still can't charge for lift assists. There's certain medical parameters that we can't charge for. And if you look at our call volume, 25% of our calls are non-billable calls. The other biggest component that's hurting us with this right now, the biggest jump from last year to now with the change from Obamacare going away and all the other stuff, insurance companies are paying out much differently. And what I mean when they're paying out differently, we had a jump of almost $78,000 that got added on to our Medicare write-offs because of how the insurance companies pay out. We have to absorb that cost. You see what I'm saying? So being fiscally responsible, trying to be within that 4% of our endowment, you know, we sat down and really crunched a lot of numbers and said, all right, this is where we need to be to make this work. That's where those numbers came from as far as, you know, like Mr. Stockman said, CHEMS is a payroll-driven organization now. The days of volunteerism have really gone away. The paramedics that I employ here, you know, they're here 24/7. That's a great thing for this town. For years, we had paramedics that were here and people were responding from home, from a volunteer basis. Sometimes they got a driver, sometimes they didn't. Now, both those positions are staffed and both those positions are paid. So, barring the ambulance being on a second ambulance call, or being committed on another emergency, that truck's there and ready to go. And that's a huge service, 24/7. And if you look at our numbers, we were at like 99.7% coverage. That's amazing.
Excellent.
And when you look at what we're paying for that, it's quite a deal. It's quite a deal.
The other thing, let me just point out that the other thing that we do cover, for example, if we do have a fire call, lost somebody, our ambulance responds automatically so that we don't have to wait if there's a problem. So there's a lot of support to the fire department, to the police department, to the public health department, that again, if nobody is transported, we do not get paid. And that's why we've had to change our whole model. The other thing to talk to Joe's point is simply this. We have to be competitive in York County today to attract the best people.
You want me to take this one?
Go ahead. Joe, by the way, also is full-time at SACO, and he also works for WEMS, which is the Wells Emergency Medical. And so he knows about this group of dedicated people who hire out all the towns on a per diem basis. So take that.
All right, so basically what Mr. Stockman is saying is everybody's picking fruit from the same tree when it comes to per diem workers. Unless they're a full-time worker, like in Saco, I'm a full-time lieutenant paramedic there. Biddeford, if you work in Biddeford, that's your full-time job. A lot of the people that are paramedics in these services, because there's a paramedic and an EMT shortage in this state, they work per diem at other services. So what that means is I'm competing with Kennebunk, Wells, Arundel, York, a whole bunch of other places for the same people. And to be able to compete with them, we have to pay a wage that's commensurate for the surrounding area. So one of the things that we did last year, we adjusted our payroll system and basically put in a longevity-based system for our paramedics to make it, you know, we want to get the best people, we want them to stay. So we did that. That's how the service had to change. In June, July of this year, we need to create some separation between our drivers and our EMTs. Because at first, when we first funded the driver position, we took that money out of the endowment. We didn't come back to the town and say, hey, by the way, we figured out that we weren't playing within the state law rules, and we had to start paying those people. We couldn't just 1099 them anymore. So after sitting with our financial people, they said, you need to pay them. So when we started paying them, we took that money out of the endowment. Coming back to that now, this year in July, again, to be competitive with the surrounding services, we need to create some separation for the people that are just, I don't want to say untrained drivers, but they don't have a medical license, and somebody that's an EMT, somebody that's an advanced EMT, somebody that's a paramedic. There's a lot of schooling and work that goes into that, and these people need to be paid commensurately for that. But to make us competitive with the surrounding services, we have to pay competitively like they do, or we're gonna, you want the best, you pay for the best, but you guys, you certainly have it down here.
Thank you very much for the explanation.
Sure.
I think Ted wants to say something. Yeah.
Joe, you said volunteerism is dead. I won't compare us to EMTs, but there are 15 volunteers sitting in front of you.
I don't mean in all facets of life. I should have clarified that with volunteerism in the fire service and EMS in a lot of areas. I shouldn't say is dead, it is dying because of the amount of schooling people have to take, the stuff that they have to do to recertify their licenses. A lot of it's time and commitment. People are busier nowadays too. I'm a father of 5. How much time do you think I spend at home? Not a lot, okay? Just people are busier. The volunteerism aspect of it with our board, CHEMS could not function without the hard work of the board. I'm sure the town could not function without the people that are volunteering to be selectmen and budget board and all this stuff. That's all wonderful stuff. But does that clarify what I said a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Well, in the interest of getting you home to your 5 kids.
I'm here until 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. So
We're not.
Is there any, do we need to take appropriate, oh, I'm sorry.
I have just a comment. I'm the selectman representative to the board of CHEMS, and I've been in that position for 5 years. What they're saying is absolutely true. The table has shifted dramatically in 1 year on them because of what we lost with Obamacare going away. The benefit that we gain from having this team in place, we are not paying for their training. We are getting fully trained people coming to us, qualified in every respect, that we can use to our benefit. And so if you look at it from that standpoint, it is a great benefit to the town, what we're getting.
Thank you, Pat. Is it appropriate for us to discuss raising that budget this evening, that a dollar amount, or?
So we don't vote on the budget recommendations until later, but it certainly, if people want to discuss the budget, that's why we're here.
Yes.
Okay.
I have no problem with penciling it in on my side, Barbara, if you guys don't have any problem with it on yours. Is there any issues here?
None.
I think it's money well spent.
Anyone else want to speak?
Just a question, will the additional 20,000 go into the endowment, or will it be on some of the expenses?
It'll be for operational cost.
So
basically-
could you give an example or two?
Sure. Basically, right now, payroll is $341,800 in my budget. So that's about 80, and my total budget's about $420,000 to run the organization. So that figure for payroll alone is about 80 to 81% of my budget. That helps us cover those payroll costs, it helps us with coverage, it helps us with equipment purchase, it helps us with basically that and part of the cash flow problem that Jim was talking about. The question the other gentleman asked about, is that gonna affect our donations? There's a lot of what ifs with these things. We did much better with the donations this year, but like he said, we're seeing people that are paying into the subscription service because they're actually getting a benefit from that subscription service of, oh, okay, if I get transported by the ambulance, an ambulance transport's roughly around $1,500 for an ALS transport. That's, IV monitor drugs, things like that. If they, so if their insurance covers $600, their supplemental insurance covers $600, they're left with a $600 bill. If they've paid that, $150 into the subscription, they're $450 ahead. That's good for them. But to get back, sorry, I got on my little horse there for a second. But I just wanted to make sure that we had that out there. But it's for operational costs. It's certainly for operational
No,
costs.
I think you guys have covered it very well, and
Yes.
we
Right.
appreciate everything that you do for the town and for the residents. And,
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I wasn't planning on it.
well, we're glad, anytime, but I think we can move on unless there's any other questions.
Well, I'd just like to say that I'd like to reserve my decision until I hear the rest of the budget. and
Oh, well,
What
absolutely.
increases and decreases we may have coming downstream.
We're all gonna get together individually and then as a group and vote on this as we do every year, but I don't see any problem with, on my side, penciling this in, and we can discuss it when we get together individually and then as a joint board. I certainly think there's worse places we could spend the money.
Agree.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
All right, moving on. Health and welfare and social service agencies. That's on page 304. Who's just taking care of that tonight?
The recap's on page 300.
Oh, thank you, Barbara.
So on page 300 is the social service agency requests. As you know, we have a subcommittee that reviews this, and then the budget reflects their recommendations. So, as chair of the budget board, I don't know if you want to discuss this or have someone on your committee.
Well, David chairs our subcommittee, so I'll let him speak to it. And I don't know if we have anybody else here from any of the agencies.
We didn't send out an
See, no.
invitation
No.
this year.
Yeah, well, sometimes, but they are persistent, sometimes.
They all received the schedule, and they
That's
all
right.
know when we are meeting.
That's right.
Yep.
Well, I can give a very quick summary,
Thank you, Dave.
and that's simply that of the, well, I guess there were total 12 applicants. The review board was unanimous in its agreement on recommending funding levels of 11 of the social service agencies for fiscal year 2020. 9 of the nonprofit agencies have requested the same funding level as approved for last year. The board supports funding the following 9 agencies at the requested levels for fiscal year 2020. American Red Cross requests $500, we support that. A Caring Unlimited, $1,500. Day One, $750. Kids Free to Grow, $750. Maine Behavioral Health Care, $3,500. Sexual Response Services, $1,000. Southern Maine Agency on Aging, $2,000. And York County Community Action, $4,000. And York County Shelter, $4,400. And all of the above agencies continue to provide a generous level of support to Kennebunkport residents, and the review board unanimously supports these requests. There were 2 agencies that requested an increase over and above 2019. One was Community Outreach Services. They were requesting $5,000, a $2,000 increase over 2019. The board recommends continued support of the agency at the 2019 level of $3,000. Although the agency provides valuable services to a number of Kennebunkport residents, such services are coordinated through the town nurse's office, and it's the opinion of Nurse Allison Kennaway and the remainder of the board agree that given the number of Kennebunkport residents serviced and the nature of the services provided, the donation of $3,000 is adequate and justified. It should be noted that Kennebunkport Public Health Department does provide some of the same services that Community Outreach provides. These include such things as sponsorship of staffing of various types of public health outreach programs in conjunction with Gray's Public Library, Stuff the Bus, food and heating fuel assistance, and a general financial fund to help with other needs. The second request was from Maine Healthcare at Home, which is the old Visiting Nurses Organization. They requested $1,200, a $200 increase over the 2019 level. We recommended that the committee support of this agency be at the 2019 level of $1,000. The agency had a total operating budget of $34,630,992, of which only 13% is spent on the cost of services delivered. Nearly 87% is spent on salaries, benefits, and employee taxes. Although the agency claims that approximately 100 Kennebunkport residents receive support from the agency in 2018, it should be noted that medical insurance covers many of such visits, and further, our own public health department provides many of the home care and nursing visits. So the bottom line is that we recommended for the social service organizations the total same level of funding that we recommended for fiscal year 2019.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Question?
Is it possible to know what percentages of the total budget of these agencies are the requests to our town?
I couldn't hear that, Ted, could you?
Yeah. Can we know what percentage of the total budget of these social service agencies are they requesting from the town?
Yes, we have a form, detailed form that we submit to each one of these agencies every year, and it requests all their budget information, auditing information, how many residents are supported, what percentage of their budget is devoted to the number of residents that is supported in Kennebunkport. So those kind of detailed informations are considered in our making a judgment.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, David. I'm good with this. Anybody have any questions on the Board of Selectmen? That's great. Barbara, do you guys have any more info?
None, unless we hear from anyone.
All right,
No?
I didn't hear anything. Thank you.
None?
All right, moving on to Public Works.
So before we
No, we
move,
got
Oh, we're-
miscellaneous.
did I miss?
so miscellaneous is normally down further
Ah,
in the
well.
agenda, but I was gonna ask David while they're there to talk about the ones that are relative to this budget. So the senior center, Life Flight, and Southern Maine Veterans Memorial.
And who were you asking to comment on?
You
Oh,
were,
me.
you were heading up the group, I
You did.
thought.
Okay, we added that as an addendum to the report. 6 miscellaneous agencies were contacted by the town in the past. 3 this year made no requesting for funding in 2020, while 3 others did request funding. They are as follows: the Chamber of Commerce, no request; Historical Society, no request; River Tree Arts, no request; the Center in Lower Village requests $3,000 from Kennebunkport for fiscal year 2020, and that's an increase of $750 over what the town approved last year. According to the center's application, some 138 Kennebunkport residents are served by the center, which is about 23% of the total membership. And this number may include some duplication of services. It's not clear from the data they've provided. The center noted last year that it was asking for a significant increase in funding from our neighbor, Kennebunk. However, a check of Kennebunk's budget shows that it provided only $2,600 in fiscal year 2019. The center claims that they again will be asking Kennebunk for a larger donation in 2020, this time for $13,700. The board believes this is highly unlikely to be approved by Kennebunk, and it's also notable that the town of Arundel did not donate any money to the center in 2019, nor have they done so in the past. So the board believes that the amount of $2,250 approved by Kennebunkport Board of Selectmen last year remains more than adequate for 2020.
Thank you, David.
The second miscellaneous agency was the Life Flight Foundation. They requested $868, and that's the same amount requested for approval in 2019. The board recommended funding this foundation at the requested amount. With the expansion of Life Flight services at York County with the helicopter program based in Sanford, Life Flight's aircraft now provide service to all of Maine. Even before this expansion, 22 Kennebunkport residents have been transported by life flight since 1998, and 3 were served in 2018. Further, it appears the service provided by this agency meets the definition of a Type A social service agency that provides life service support, and the committee recommends that we move to one of the social service agencies for consideration in future years. The third organization was Southern Maine Veterans Memorial Cemetery Association. They requested $500, the same amount as approved for 2019. This agency is a totally volunteer organization that supports and maintains the Southern Maine Veterans Memorial Cemetery located in Springville, Maine. It's a nonprofit organization that is not funded by either state or federal money. It has an operating budget of $44,000, of which $15,000 is received by donations from towns and cities in southern Maine. And according to their records, veterans of 13 Kennebunkport families are interred in the Southern Maine Veterans Cemetery. Given that Kennebunkport residents interred at the cemetery represent less than 1% of the total, the board recommends that we continue with the $500. And that concludes our recommendations.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now we'll move on to Public Works, to the Shade Tree Committee on page 179.
So Pat Briggs is the tree warden and chair of the Shade Tree Committee. And we also have Michael Claus, Public Works Director, who staffs the Shade Tree Committee. Pat, what is your pleasure?
In the bag.
I want everyone to appreciate how much work the Shade Tree Committee puts into this town and the effort that we're making to maintain the trees that we have. We are an arbor city. We need money to do this and take care of the project. About half our budget goes to take care of the elm trees. And this is done with a new program that we just started of injecting the elms at the base of the tree to let them, in the late May, June timeframe, uptake the pesticide that will kill the beetles that come to the trees. You have that one opportunity to do it. It has to get all the way to the top of the tree, so it has to be a sunny day. Everything's got to work right. But this is something that you do in hopes of keeping it. I think if you take a look at the loss of the elm trees over the decade or more that we've been working on this, you'll see that we're trying to stop that loss from occurring. So this is about half of our budget. The other half takes care of the rest of the trees in town that typically need care. We've got tags on a number of trees in town that we hope would, the cost of maintaining them would be shared with the homeowners. We've tried to work this out on an equitable basis of a 50-50 proposition. Doesn't always work. We had a tree with Dutch elm disease that was supposedly going to be shared by the cost of removing it by the homeowner, and we got a flat denial. So the Shade Tree Committee all of a sudden had to eat, $2,800 that we weren't expecting to have to eat. So these are the uncertainties that we face. So the budget has been carefully reviewed. Mike and I have worked at it. We work very closely with them because what we can do together reduces what we have to do for the Shade Tree Committee. Also, when we have a large tree that overhangs the power lines, we've been very successful in working with CMP because they have the equipment and the experience of working that problem. It's at no cost to us. So we're looking everywhere to save money, but we have to have enough to continue to maintain the program. So that's what goes into the budget that you see.
Pat, I noticed the 2019 budget was $42,000, and year-to-date, we've only spent $12,000.
I didn't bring that with me tonight. It's on my table at home. But the
was,
point is, we set aside $20,000 of that for
A
the.
lot of it happens in the spring.
In the
when
spring.
we do the elm tree treatments.
Because it hasn't, it simply
So that's
hasn't
a
happened yet,
one-time.
David. And that is when we start injecting the elms, so we have to have the money available to treat the elms when they're ready to be treated, which is basically late May, early June.
Do you have
So
to,
you think you'll be spending pretty close to the
Oh.
budget like that?
Yeah. If you look around
Yeah.
at some of the trees that still need to be pruned and taken care of, you know, the maple tree in front of the Kennebunkport Inn down here needs to be fertilized and maintained. It has a lot of character if you look at trees from that standpoint. We've pruned out the deadwood, and we are also trying to maintain the tree so it'll continue to live. For how much longer, we don't know, but if we don't try, you know, it's on the way down. So we do these things when we have the budget for it. There's more than what we can cover, so,
do you have to,
Second question,
yeah.
has the town contracted with a new tree service?
Yes.
To replace Bob Palmer so that we have
Yeah,
something?
Bob Palmer retired. He
I
had,
know he retired.
had health issues and so forth after a long career with us. But we need to have an arborist who is technically qualified to advise us on what we do with the trees. We have a consultant, Kurt Waltersdorf, who is an arborist and certified in Maine and very experienced, and he gives us advice on the trees. We've got a program that covers the town and takes care of the trees that we need to be monitoring and the ones we need to be removing. We're concerned about safety primarily, not so much beauty. I mean, that comes from it. But I don't want to have trees or limbs falling on people in public places. There was an elm tree beside the bank across the street from the town office that had a limb that was hanging over the driveway that was half rotted out. We have to take it down. I mean, and the money's got to come from somewhere. So that's what the cushion, if you want to say, is in the budget.
do you have to inject the elm trees every year?
It's a 3-year process now for the elm trees. The treatment has been very successful by Bartlett Tree Company because they do the trees in Vermont at the university over there, and they have not lost an elm tree in the last 23 years. So I think it speaks very well of their technique and the program. We want to use that program here. We started last year. This will be the second year of that. And then the third year, so it's going to be every third year we come back to the original trees.
Yeah.
We're going to cover as many elm trees as we can in town, and God help the rest.
Any other questions on the?
Yeah.
Ted?
There are several places in your budget where you spent much less than what was budgeted, or fertilization, you spent nothing. Could you explain what happened to the more than $12,000 in 2018, where it went?
It was very well used and frugally, I assure you there. We're going to fertilize the maple tree that I mentioned in front of the Kennebunkport Inn. That's going to cost $1,400. So, you know, when you look at that, and that's one tree, but it is a signature tree. If you look at the photos of Dock Square all the time, you see these trees. So we're focusing on the ones that we need to keep the character of the town and the appearance that people like. I mean, everybody that I know comes to town and says, gee, you have a beautiful town, it's got a lot of trees, everything's wonderful. This is how we do it.
I mean, part of what is challenging about this budget is that they have to save their money for spring when the majority of the work is done, because their budget starts in July and you're not gonna trim trees in July. And the elm protection is a big part of it. The other piece is we don't know what damage the winter's gonna do and so what cleanup they'll need. So they do try and approach homeowners where a lot of these shade trees are connected, and if they can come to agreement, that reimbursement or that cost share with that homeowner goes back into their budget. So sometimes we might have billed people and they're not sure that that reimbursement is gonna be seen by June 30th when we close the books. And so they're trying to plan how their budget, because they have a town manager who is saying, don't overspend your budget. Yeah, I'm watching you. And so they do their best, but sometimes we might get a reimbursement in, and so it looks like they spent less than they might have been showing in May, per se, because a reimbursement check will come in. So it's a bit of a dance near the end of the fiscal year.
I still have the question, 2018, what happened to the surplus of 30% or more than $12,000?
Well, the extra money that you're alluding to that is there at the end of the year dictates how many elm trees we will treat.
You're saying what happened to the balance? The balance goes back into the general fund. And
Well,
so,
If there's-
I would also point out that 2018 was a transition year with Bob Palmer
yeah.
retiring
Right.
and not able to provide a lot of service he has in the past. But I've got a follow-up question, Pat. A lot of us have elm trees. I've got 5 of them on my property that Bob used to come every year and inoculate.
Right.
Are they going to be continued to treated under this new program, or are we off the books on that?
No, basically what we're doing is two things. One, we will come to the second group of elm trees that we're looking at. We took the largest for the first time, for the first year, simply because that was all the money we had, and we wanted to save the largest trees. We're now looking at the second group, which will be slightly, and when I say large, in terms of the girth of the trunk. So because it's a 3-year program, you will probably see something either this year, depending on the size of the tree.
Okay. Well, these are tagged trees.
Yes,
All
no,
are tagged
I know that.
in the registry.
I realize that, but some of the tag trees are, like this big around.
Yeah. Ours are not that.
No, that's why I say we will get to you eventually.
Okay, again, any more questions from the Board of Selectmen? You good? Thank you, Barbara. Okay, moving on to Cemetery Committee on page 183.
So 183 is the cemetery committee, and I'm gonna ask them to come up to the podium and give you an overview of their budget. I will say that last year, the budget was up, you can see in salary and wages, because again, we had an intern last year that spent some of their time on cemetery work, and we're not having that intern this year, so that's why you're seeing a decrease in the salary and wages. But they still have salary needs for maintenance at the cemetery.
This will be quick because nothing much has changed except what Lori just talked about. Our budget basically is the same for taking care of.
And Ruth, you are?
I am Ruth Fernandez, Chair of the Cemetery Committee.
There you go.
And I know a lot of you, so I didn't know I had to introduce myself. Nothing's really changed with the committee, and we have the same issue where we don't do a lot of the spending until the springtime, when we see what trees have blown down and headstones have gotten knocked over and things like that. Besides being the overseer of these 80-ish or so small cemeteries in town, we also preserve the cemetery records and update them if necessary, if somebody's moved, well, if the owners of the property have moved. Or we have actually found a few new cemeteries over the years that were not in Clary Nickerson's book, who did the major amount of research on the cemeteries in town. But I wanted to make you aware of a little piece of history that we have in our records. This was given to me by Barbara Barr Wise a number of years ago. She found it in the town vault, and it's dated 1909, and it actually has to do with the monument in the middle of the town square, and I'm just going to read you the first 2 paragraphs of it. It's beautifully written, old cursive, which is actually a little hard to read, so I have it printed out. They fought for country, soldiers of the Civil War from Kennebunkport. All honor to them. Names to be placed in receptacle beneath the monument. Any of you guys aware of this? That there is a receptacle beneath that monument? At the dedication of the Soldiers and Sailors Monument at Kennebunkport, Monday, May 31st, the names of the soldiers who served their country during the Civil War were read together with their time of service and other honorable mention. These names are to be placed in a strong box that will be placed in a receptacle beneath the monument in honor of meritorious service. The list was read at the dedication with the following introduction. Names of men who were native of or residents of the town of Kennebunkport who volunteered and served with honor on land and sea in the war that preserved the Union, 1861 to 1865, and who were brave and true in these, the days and hours of our country's greatest peril. And then it lists, I think it was about 171 of Kennebunkport's finest. And actually, I was looking over them today, and you would recognize a lot of the names that are on these, just the old town names. And there actually were 7 Hutchins. Any questions?
No.
Yes.
Yeah, the obvious question is, what about people from other wars?
Well, you know, I just went down yesterday to look at the monument to see exactly what was on it. And there's, on one side, there is a plaque that lists World War I.
Yeah.
That's it. But then there is another plaque, just a nice little square plaque in front, that says, to the soldiers and sailors of this town, or something like that, 1909, which is the date that this was written. So I don't know, but I don't know about the other
The other
ones.
soldiers, sailors, airmen, marines are all inscribed at the American Legion in Cape Porpoise, all the way
In a
through the Gulf
monument,
War.
on a monument.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a monument
Good
there.
to know, I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah, there's more Hutchinses on that too.
There's a Matthews on there, too.
I don't know, but my name's on that thing. Well, thank you very much, Ruth.
That was interesting.
Yes, I'd love to get a copy of that. Okay, moving on, recreation and other expenses, 199, page 191, Graves Library. Mary Lou, would you like to, and David, would you like to come and speak?
I brought my boss with me tonight.
That was the other way around.
So, my name is Mary Lou Bugavalis. I'm the library director at Graves Library. In my 21st year there, I can't believe it. Some of the parents, some of the children that I first encountered when I started as children's librarian now have children and are coming in. And it doesn't make me feel old. It makes me feel very proud. So, on behalf of the board, the staff, and the volunteers, we thank you for inviting us tonight to present and answer questions. But first, I wanted to say thanks for your ongoing support of library operations. As you can see by the budget we submitted, we are trying our best to remain physically prudent. Our line items increase have to do with insurances, accounting expenses, building maintenance, and utilities.
So I'm gonna just stop you.
Yep.
And let people know that on pages 195, they can see the detail on your budget.
Yes.
But behind this one page on 191, there are pages that talk about your requests, and so if they have questions.
Thank you. So, We are, we're working hard to continue to raise funds and awareness to meet our goals each year. We have an amazing volunteer pool, and we are, so Ted, to answer your question, there are some still alive and well in the volunteering at the library. And we're always looking for new ones. We have an amazing staff that creates a welcoming, safe, and comfortable place for people to gather, work, and learn. Our patron registration increased by 285 last year, so currently we have about 6,300 patrons. Our amount of programs offered and the attendance at these programs has been incredible, especially with the new Mother's Wing. Ruth and I were talking recently about if you build it, they will come. They have been coming, and it has been wonderful to see people turning out to a variety of things offered. We've seen so many new families, new visitors, new seniors taking advantage of our services, shopping in the bookseller, coming in to read the newspapers or working from the library so they don't have to commute to Boston or Portland. Some of them come in for the whole day and set up shop, and we just love seeing that. Love seeing the young families joining us for not only Friday story time, but they're coming in regularly during the week to meet up with other friends. So whatever and Terry and Stephanie upstairs put out for them, it's just incredible to see this. And all of this positive activity is in part because this town has been so amazing and supportive of what we do and what we hope to do each year. So thank you, Lori. Thank you, Ed, our Selectman liaison, all of you here, and the residents of Kennebunkport. So would you like to say anything? And we're happy to answer questions.
David Klein, President of the Board of Trustees. I'd like to actually just, it's kind of a commercial really, because you know we spend a lot of time fundraising throughout the year to help supplement our budget. And we have our traditional author event speaking on June 20th. Mark Wortman, who is an historical fiction author, will be there. That's a public event. Tickets will be on sale shortly. And then this year, we are having a new event for us, which is a garden, or secret Gardens of the Kennebunkport tour, July 20th, which is a Saturday. So we've got, again, a ton of volunteers working to set that up, and that will be a public event, hopefully a major fundraiser for us. I'm trying it anew this year that try to supplement what we receive from the town, our annual fundraiser, as well as the other kind of events we do, and the income from our endowment. So, and we have a little under $70,000 now left to pay on the loan that we borrowed to construct the new wing, and we're hoping that we'll find some citizens that will help us pay that off, and so we'll be debt-free in the hopefully not-too-distant future.
Very good.
So,
That's wonderful.
good. Questions?
Come a long ways. Yeah, in a short
Yeah,
period of time.
and tonight's movie night, by the way. You know, the third Thursday of every month. Waking Ned Devine is probably 5 minutes into its show tonight. So again, that starts 6:45, third Thursday of every month.
Martinis and popcorn.
Whatever, yes. And the movie next time, I think, is Master and Commander.
Yes.
And, yeah, good one. So, questions, comments?
Just a plug for my wife. I don't see any mention of the volunteers who provide baked goods for speakers.
Well, that's a great committee, by the way. And we have several different groups of volunteers. And we rely on all of them so much. The people that they're at the front desk, the people that man the bookstore, the book sale downstairs, the people that provide the baked goods and the hors d'oeuvres for all of our events, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In fact, there is a Volunteer Appreciation Day coming up in April, I believe, for us to recognize the tremendous support we get.
Just to follow up on that, you want to be sure to emphasize that in your town report.
A great idea, right? And if you're not, by the way, if you're not, and I'll shut up in a second. If you're not on the library's email list, there is a weekly report of what's going on at Graves Library. It's kind of a broadcast message, so it'll keep you let Mary Lou know, give her your email address, and we'll make sure you get the weekly notification that talks about our fundraising events, the movies, et cetera, so.
And we do appreciate Liz's brownies.
Well,
Seriously, we
yeah,
do.
I would say I appreciate the business service area that has been added. It's a wonderful contribution to the citizens of Kennebunkport.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's good. Okay,
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Mary Lou. Okay, moving on. Cape Porpoise Library. Dick, would you like to come and speak to us? Page 197.
Hello, I'm Dick Smith. I am the treasurer for, actually officially it is the Atlantic Firemen's Education Association, better known as the Cape Porpoise Community Library and the Atlantic Hall. And I guess I want to start by expressing the thanks on behalf of the patrons of the Cape Porpoise Library for the support of the voters, the Board of Selectmen, the boards of budget review and so on over the past years. Your support has really helped us keep the doors open, and the people of Cape Porpoise continue to show how much they really appreciate that little library. And for those of you who have not been there, that library is perhaps a third the size of this room. And last year, I really thought I was announcing a landmark statistic when I reported that our patron visits in the prior year had been 22% over our previous high. Well, this year, that blew me away. We're nearly another 20% over that. Now, part of that is because with our volunteers, we have also been open on some random days of some other special events and such things as the day of the pancake breakfast that the Atlantic Hall puts on. And of course, the Cape Porpoise Library is connected to, in fact, the emergency egress is through the hall. Our librarian said, time to get some of our volunteers to put together some baked goods and let's have a cookbook sale. Well, you know, what a great idea, and it worked. But it's that kind of interest that keeps things going, and it's a fun place to be. And that fun is growing all the time. Our expenses are predicted to be a little bit higher next year, but our budget request is the same as it was last year, which indeed is the same as it was the year before. And we are dedicated to make up the difference from such things as those cookbook sales. So,
Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
Right, and moving on to Parsons Way. Is there anybody here to speak to Parsons Way?
There is no one here for Parsons Way.
You're up, Lori.
$100 up, it's pretty flat.
Well, looks like the, what we got here?
$100 increase.
Okay, we have $100 increase, so we're
Flat to previous.
talking $4,000.
I have no
Poison-
questions.
Bittersweet, poison ivy eradication, et cetera. Any budget board questions?
No.
Selectmen? All right. I guess we'll finish up with Memorial Day.
Dock Square 4th.
Yeah, and 4th of July, Dock Square Monument. Oh, 209.
So on page 209 is the miscellaneous agencies. Memorial Day is a contribution to the Legion for the Memorial Day Parade. They're the ones who organize it each year. There is a $1,700 request for Dock Square Monument. So the monument that we were just talking about, you know, it's decked with flowers and pruned, and Seacoast Garden Club does that all year.
It's beautiful.
But this is our contribution to the supply, so we pay for the materials and they volunteer to do the maintenance. We also have the 4th of July fireworks, so we split the cost of the fireworks with the town of Kennebunk. And it has not gone up this year as predicted, so they're asking for $37.50. And then we've already covered the Southern Maine Veterans Memorial Life Flight and Senior Center when we talked about the social service agencies. I don't know if there's any questions or comments on that.
Looks good to me. Barbara,
See
you
any
guys?
here?
Okay.
No.
Time, do we want, is there anything else anyone would like
Yes,
to?
there is something else.
Yes.
So Michael Claus is coming up. And Michael, we're gonna need the projector and the screen.
Always something.
So I need you guys to split in the middle, so you don't get blinded by the projector.
All right, you going that way, Sheila?
Going this way.
So one of the big issues we've been talking about this year has been the recycling and solid waste. Jen, can you help me? Oh, no, you're busy, never mind. And so I asked Mike, because a lot of people seem to be making a decision about solid waste and recycling based on whether or not they thought all of our recycling was going into the waste stream. So I asked Michael to put some other facts together, and I can pass it, and give you a little insight into what we can in terms of data, just to make sure that you have the information you need to make good decisions. Mike? I did print these out because it's a little small and there's a lot of information, so you might want to refer to it.
So, taking a look around at what we have for single sort recycling data, the best data I found was done in 2016 by the University of New Hampshire in the city of Portsmouth, where they actually went and did 30 homes. They did 30 homes at random of their single sort recycling. They went through it. They did recycling picking and took out what was there and weighed it and talked about it. And there's a 38-page report, and if anybody wants it, I can send it to them. So some of this is most of this is coming out of that report because it does a good job of saying, you know, what's in your recycling, and then. And obviously, this was 2016 when prices were, when markets were good for single sort recycling. So I've pointed out, you know, what has changed since then. This month in the American Public Works Association magazine, the cover story was recycling. The solid waste, our National Solid Waste Committee is hearing from towns all over the place on what to do about recycling. And so a lot of people are facing the same questions that we're facing. But what we're looking at is what they found in Portsmouth was what you'd expect to find. When you go through curbside recycling, you will find good recyclables and contaminants. And there's a list there of all the contaminants you might see, and these are the bad things that we don't want in our recycling: plastic bags, believe it or not, small things that go through the screens, unnumbered plastics, coat hangers, cooking pots, toasters, you know, and you can go through the list. And I'm sure if you talk to Oceanside, they would say they have found any and everything in the recycling bins. But that can all get sorted out, and that's all going to be trash. But we're looking at what's called true recycling in single sort, which are the things that used to be worth money, and there's a bunch of things that aren't worth money anymore. And of those, are the mixed paper is at the top, and that's the newspapers, books, magazines, office paper, other paper, box board. So what's happening with that is it's either it's either gonna get landfilled, incinerated, or you're gonna have to pay someone to take it away. And a mill may or may not accept it. They may store it, they may use it. It's a very tough market to find someone to take your mixed paper right now. So you have to pay to get rid of it. And you don't have any guarantee that it's actually getting recycled. Steel and tin are good markets. That will get recycled. You know, you can take it to Arundel, anywhere you want, you know, but the people are not having a problem with tin cans, either or aluminum cans. Glass. Any kind of glass is pretty much landfill material. There is no market for glass anywhere in New England. So no company that we or town we know of is able to recycle glass. It's being used, when we talk to Waste Management about it, they're crushing it and using it as landfill cover material. So that's about as good as we can get, is use it as covering a landfill. Number one, plastics. Number two, plastics are marketable. We can sell those. There is no market. There's very little market, I should say. You have to pay to get rid of your 3 through 7, and it's hard to find somebody who will take it. But there are some uses for that. But basically, burning it is what's, I think, happening with most of it right now because it makes good fuel. But there is a very limited market for 3 through 7. So you could store it and wait and see if it becomes valuable, but I don't think anybody is doing that. So that's what's happening in recycling right about now.
A question, Mike. What's the definition difference between boxboard and corrugated?
Boxboard is just, it has no corrugations in it. It's just a sort of a thick card. It's a thick
Single layer.
single layer of yeah, I think you can have thicker boxboard too. Sometimes you get packaging that's just got the heavier gray stock board on it. I think that's boxboard.
And how about bubble wrap?
Contaminant.
Okay.
Anything that's wrapped or anything that's not solid. If you can move it, it's trash.
Okay.
Go to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, she lost it.
Sorry.
I've got a question. What about for years and years and years, newspaper was always something that could be recycled. You get bags that say they're 25% reused. You get printer paper that says it's, recycled.
There's just not that much paper being used, so I think the fiber is cheaper. There's so much material out there that it's overwhelmed what little
I
demand
think
there
if
is
it's
for.
clean office paper and you can really separate the office paper, that still might have some of a market.
Right.
But that's not normally what they find.
So if you were at a if you were still doing our little transfer station where someone came in and put all the white paper in one bin and all the newspaper in another bin and didn't mix your paper up, I think that has a market to it, but that's a bunch of sorting that doesn't exist with single sort. So this is just your basic pie chart. This comes from what they found in the New Hampshire recycling bins, and half of it was fiber, 31% glass, 14% plastics, 5% metal. So those are your 4 items, and that's what's in there. And obviously, there's lots of little slices in there of things, but we mix everything up because this is single sort. So, this is not going, in other towns that have their own recycling centers, you could separate all this out, but we do not. So that just gives you an idea of what we're looking at in the single sort. So here are some numbers, and we're just trying to get an idea of what we're seeing out there. And basically, those 30 bins weighed 367 pounds, and they they really did a good job of measuring out what was what. So if you look at that, when they measured it all out, the things that are valuable are the corrugated cardboard, which was 16%, metals and alloys were 5%, plastics number 1 and 2 were 12%. So 1/3 of what was in those bins of recyclables that was good was marketable, and 2/3 was not. So that's what you got to think about as we go forward. Only 1/3 of the recyclables are actually marketable.
So is that considered contaminants, the others, or is that just considered something we're
Those,
gonna
those,
typically
well,
for?
in the old days, that would all gotten recycled and we weren't paying anything for it. So 1/3 of it, you can still make money out of. 2/3, there's either no market or you gotta pay to recycle it. So, and so we're,
Well, Mike, this data is August of 2016.
yes, yes.
That has changed
Uh,
significantly since China has dropped out.
Well, I don't think what we're putting in the bins hasn't changed. I don't, we haven't, these are based on what
Well,
was
I'm
actually.
referring to your marketable recyclables.
That's, yeah, marketable, recyclable. In 2016, they were saying these were all marketable, true recyclables. But
But I assume that's changed.
that has changed now.
Well, it has changed, but those marketable, true recyclables are still marketable today.
Right.
Cardboard, metal, and plastic 1 and 2, they're saying are still marketable, and the others are not.
Today's reality.
Yep,
Yes.
it still reflects that.
Okay. So I think then we've tried to come up with some costs, if you want to go to the next slide. So you gotta remember, you still gotta, when you pick up that bin, if you're just looking at it, 13% of it is gonna be trash in the bin.
That's based on what UNH did in Portsmouth.
Right, and I looked at what they did, I saw the pictures, they took pictures of what they had, and it looked very similar to what you would see in our recycling bins. Not that we couldn't correct that with education and resident help, but I think from a budgeting standpoint, if I were to try to come up with a budget, I would say we'd have to budget for 13% contamination right now, and work on it.
And Mike did talk with Carl from Oceanside about these figures, and Carl felt that they would be fairly accurate for our situation.
He said he supported the numbers.
89,000?
No, about the number of contaminants,
Oh.
the percentage of contaminants.
So we do about 400 tons of recycling a year. That's been fairly consistent. So if you did that and took at it, we probably have about 52 tons of contaminated recycling. We probably have about 233 tons where we would have to pay, or there would be no market for the recyclables. And so that's a total of the 400 tons, about 285. We're not getting anything for, and we're gonna have to pay to get rid of. So we're actually going to recycle out of that 400 tons, about 115 tons. I would be very confident telling you, yes, that material got recycled. So, that number to me is kind of, it's not a good number, but I think it's a realistic number. So what's that gonna cost? It's gonna cost us to send the truck around every other week, $45,000. Which is, I don't think we're gonna get anything lower than that. Our disposal costs, the best one that we have found, we can take it to EcoMaine, we could take it to Waste Management in New Hampshire, we could take it to Casella up in Lewiston. And trucking costs would increase, and both Waste Management and Casella have said their tipping fee to put it on the floor is gonna be higher than EcoMaine. So I think that given our contamination and the base tipping fee from EcoMaine, I think we're gonna pay about $110 a ton for recycling, for that 400 tons. That's everything that comes in. They're gonna charge us $44,000. So if we maintain every other week recycling, I think we should budget $89,000. And when you look at that, what you get for the $89,000, you've actually recycled 115 tons, and that comes to $774 a ton, which is a large number. So I just wanted you to see those numbers.
Now, the key question, I'm sorry, Ted.
Go ahead.
The key question, you've got 3 marketable recycles, corrugated cardboard, which we already got some collection facilities for, and metal alloys, and plastics 1 and 2. If we were to collect those locally, would the collectors then give us a break on the price because those are marketable recycles?
We would have to work that out. That, you know, if we collect those locally, you don't have that, you'd have compacting, whether you had compacting costs, whether you collected them loose, you have a trucking cost, so that could all be looked at. But I was just giving you numbers for keeping our system as it is.
I understand, but
If there are other things we could do, but I haven't come up with numbers for other things yet.
Why can't you have a contamination fee of $0 by telling the citizens what should go in and what shouldn't?
you're gonna go around and inspect all those recycled bins?
Can you shut that off?
Summer residents,
Are you done, Mike?
Yeah, I'm done.
Just so we can return to
Okay.
our seats. Well, you know, I've run some rental properties over the years here in town, both for myself and whatever. And you can't. We pick up rental property, and it's amazing. When you go to different places, recycling means different things, especially, you know, to our neighbors to the north. You know, I have found everything in the recycling. And in the end, we got to the point when I was dealing with seasonal rentals, I just said, don't bother, because it just simply wasn't recycling. It was just another form of trash, is what it, unfortunately, it turned out to be.
Every one of our buckets at Goose Rocks Beach is marked, no household trash. Check them sometime.
How's that work
Yeah,
now?
and,
Oh, perfect.
and after all this time, recycling cans and bottles, the 5-cent cans and bottles, and they have a hole this big in it, and it says cans and bottles, inevitably, you take the cover off and there's trash in there.
Absolutely.
And then that's been going on for years,
Or
so,
worse.
yeah,
Yeah.
or worse.
But Ed, you know, we rent every summer a cottage out, I don't forget the peninsula now, right, you know, but, we, at the end of our week, are required to take the trash and the recyclables up to a central location where they have dumpsters that are segregated for cardboard, for glass, for plastics. And they got a guy there that watches you when you bring it in and dump the stuff in the dumpster. So they seem to be able to segregate it, and
Well, if we want to have a police force to monitor what people are putting in there, either at their homes or up at the town barn, well, that's going to cost money too. I'm not opposed to recycling. What I'm opposed to is just spending money to make us all feel good about ourselves. Because
Need someone to throw it away.
You need to know that the roll-off at the our police department, that the Rotary Club collected the nickel deposit things. At the police department, people put garbage in that roll-off. You cannot police it.
as Ron
And
White
Ed-
says, you can't fix stupid.
Right, exactly. But Ed's right. We're just paying money
Yeah.
for people to feel
yeah,
good.
but Ty, on the other hand, I take all my bottles and stuff up to Hannaford and put it in the
Right.
program
Yeah.
up there, and there's no trash in that.
But that is completely foreign,
But
unfortunately, to
that's
certain
totally
people.
different. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
totally
people,
different.
believe it or not, around this country and other places have never heard of recycling. You know, so I question some of the numbers about the New Hampshire study because they don't have recycling. So their metal count is probably a lot higher than what ours would be.
So the purpose was not to make us argue, but to provide more information. So what I was hearing from people is how much is it really contaminated? How much are we really throwing away? I don't want to spend money if we're just throwing it away. Mike and I don't believe that everything we're collecting and recycling is going in the incinerator and landfill. But I would tell you, my guess is it depends on the day and the market and the load and all kinds of factors. I think that we know that we would be paying a $65 a ton processing fee. So certainly, we haven't done any education to speak of. You know, we have it very passive on the website, so certainly any efforts we make could improve things, I think. Certainly, there will be a contamination fee on top of, if we are 5% or over in contamination, they'll charge us a processing fee. A contamination fee on top of the processing fee. So Mike has done his best to say there will probably be some contamination out there. We've talked about having dumpsters. I mean, we don't have a transfer station here. If we start to set up even a mini transfer station, keep in mind that that will require some state approval and process to go through. Mike and I have talked about, you know, could we partner with one of our neighbors who does have a transfer station, and maybe we could do some recycling with them. But you know, next week, we're supposed to start voting on our budget proposals. And so we're just trying to provide more information and say, is there anything else you want us to pursue? Because at the end of the day, our contract will be up after we approve the budget. And so we need to have a plan of how much money we might put in this budget, you know, to investigate other alternatives. Or to stay with the status quo.
Sometimes considering the absurd helps put things into perspective. Why not cut out the recycling program completely?
I think that's what I was just discussing. Yeah.
About doing that thing, what you just mentioned.
We could keep the cardboard.
There was a very interesting, I don't know if those of you listen to podcasts, but one of my favorites is Marketplace with Kai Risdall. And I was going through today, I was a little behind, and while I was out working on my lobster traps, it's a good time to get caught up. And at that time, there was a small section in, I believe it was the night before last's episode, about exactly what we're talking about. And a lot, according to this podcast, a lot of municipalities, both big and small throughout the country, are doing away with curbside. And it's not just China that was accepting our trash, according to this, our recycling. India, Pakistan, they named a few others, and they don't want it either. So this problem, and it is a problem, is not going to go away. You know, not in the old sense. You know, the only way it's going to go away is when we as consumers refuse to accept plastic packaging or non-truly recyclable packaging from the products that we buy. And that's just the cold, hard truth.
Well, I certainly support the concept of eliminating bi-weekly votes, so I picked up a commingled recycled material.
Yeah.
But I would hate to see us do that without looking at other possibilities. I mean, we've got, when the contract's up in August or something like that, you know, we've got some time to look into other possibilities and talk to the collectors. If we were to,
Well, we have a conservation or a recycling committee, I believe.
Yeah.
We don't have a recycling committee? We can make an ad hoc one. You can be in charge of it,
We
Dave.
have a solid waste committee by
Okay.
ordinance, but they're not active currently.
Okay. Well, we certainly can do something, and I'm not opposed, you know.
that's a lot to talk to, though.
That's not gonna help the budget right now. We don't
Correct,
know what we're gonna do
but I mean,
about the budget.
correct. And we're gonna have to make that hard decision whether we're going to do away with recycling or not in this budget. You know, that's
So-
the reality of
So keep
it.
in mind that if we do away with recycling and we're gonna throw everything away, there's a tipping fee increase that we have to include in the budget. It would certainly be lower than this proposed budget. But if you also want to look at other avenues, we have to include monies for that. So we're just looking for feedback so that before next Thursday, if you say, we wanna try proposal X, then we can tell you how much money you would need to do proposal X.
Well, wasn't it when Ocean and Casella were here talking to us, they explained the whole situation, that a lot of the recyclables wind up going into the fire anyway. But they also said that they would continue to do their due diligence in trying to find ways for using recycled materials, blah, blah, blah. And they said that they would keep us posted. You know, my feeling is, until we get something viable, and not having it cost us so much money that it winds up going into the fire anyway. I just think we do away with it until we get some
Well, don't
feedback.
places like Philadelphia, they're taking their burnable recycling materials and selling it to a waste-to-energy facility. Don't they get some consideration for that? I mean, that's a fuel source for generating energy.
Well, some of this is certainly going to be burnt as well, but I think, I don't even know. My take on it was, if they've got to sort it out, they say it's zero sort, but if they've got to sort it out and they can't sell it, you're gonna pay for it no matter what they decide to do with it in the end. Landfill or trash to energy. You know, I don't think we're gonna get to the crux to this tonight, you know. I think we're gonna have to give it some thought through it, you know, between now and when we meet again. You know, I challenge every one of you to give it some thought as to what you think about it. Is it a pure dollar and cents issue? Or is it something that, you know, we wanna continue because it makes us feel good? And hopefully come up with a better solution next year. Kick the proverbial can down the road.
What I would suggest is that in order to prepare for next week, and bring in some guidance, I think, perhaps to go away with the notion that curbside recycling will be eliminated, that you will increase the tipping fee accordingly to offset whatever that change is, and retain some of the savings, you know, that comes from that change to be applied potentially towards some recycling solution. And if it doesn't wind up being used or a solution isn't found, it can be used for the research, it can be used for development, or it can roll back into the general fund at the end of the year if it winds up, or any portion of it winds up being unused.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, because we are doing a major part of this recycling right now. I mean, cardboard, we have 2 locations here in town, and I often take cardboard, you know, when I have big pieces of it, down to Bradbury's, and it looks like they're doing a pretty good business there for getting cardboard.
Couldn't we keep the cardboard piece, even without curbside? We could still keep
I
the
wouldn't
cardboard.
dream of doing
Right.
away with that.
Right,
Yeah, absolutely, Kai.
right.
Do we get paid for the cardboard, or do they charge us for picking that up too?
Yeah.
Lori?
They do charge us for picking it up, but it's included in the overall contract.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the issues with the cardboard in dock squares, it's not compacted. So you're taking a very light load and transporting it more than the cost. I think they're getting, what, $30 a ton? And I think when it's compacted, he said it's about, down at Bradbury's, it's about a half a ton. So when you think you might have a potential of $15 revenue compared to your trucking costs, it's.
So perhaps some of that money goes towards a compacting
Yeah.
dumpster for you know,
Right.
You know, the cardboard. I mean, that's just one idea,
Yeah.
maybe a dumb one,
Yeah.
but it's an idea.
Sure.
No, it's a
That
good idea,
how
Stu.
we, you know, find ways to grow what works for us, and eliminate what doesn't work for us.
But to your question, David, I think that you're spot on to say, let's pay the money where we can actually recycle, you know, i.e. the 2 compactors that we have around town. That's a good use of spending taxpayer dollars and doing the right thing, as opposed to, as I.
Well, majority of people I've talked to recognize the economics of the situation and say, yeah, it doesn't make sense to continue to pay $205 or whatever it is dollars a ton for stuff that
It's gonna
Yeah.
be burned anyway.
85 or 90% of it gets burned.
And you know, one of the good
But
things.
they also say, culturally, it's tough to give up on the whole idea.
Absolutely.
Of trying to recycle material.
And that's one of the problems here is that, you know, we are trying to do the right thing, but it's become increasingly difficult. And as I said earlier, and, you know, not to drag this meeting out any longer than it has to, you know, we as consumers have to demand change. Go to Starbucks and try to get a plastic straw today. People demanded it, and you can't do that anymore, and that was a good thing. And, you know, eventually, maybe all of this non-recyclable plastics that we use, that I see floating around the ocean every day, will go away.
So I would just remind people that, you know, one of the cons of just stopping something without a plan is you're training people twice. So you're training them that we're not doing that anymore, and then later you're training them to maybe do something different. So I would like to have a program that takes us from one to the next, and as you said, we have a little time to
Would you
do
need some
that.
money for that, Lori?
Well, until I know what it is, it's hard to say.
Okay,
But
well, I'm just
we'll-
saying that if we're going
but I'm
to,
just
in
saying
the
that-
budget here, we could set aside
Right,
some money to
right.
at least get the ball
I think if
rolling.
we keep some money in the budget for potentials, I mean, I think a partnership is probably one of their best potentials with someone who already has a
Yep.
transfer station. But that's just one thing to keep in mind. You know, some municipalities across the other states in the nation have just suspended their programs and said, when we figure it out, we'll tell you. But you're training people twice. The other thing to keep in mind, you know, it's just unfortunately here in the state of Maine, we're on the leading edge of this. You know, Augusta has faced it and some others, but not too many have gone before us here. The other thing is the Growth Planning Committee just did their comprehensive plan survey results, and 94% of respondents said that the natural resources and environment was the #1 priority they had for the town. It was either listed as very important or important. So keep in mind that the value is natural resources and environment, and we're saying we're stopping recycling. So
But we're not recycling, that's just the
I-
whole
It's
thing.
imaginary.
Right,
Yeah.
and I'm just saying that regardless, it would be good, I think, if we had a plan. I think reduce and reuse is an important part of that. I think composting, we can do things. There's other things we can do. But I would like us to keep that in mind as we always look for feedback from the citizens.
To speak to your training twice issue, perhaps part of the retention of funding or whatever you pitch for the budget, perhaps it doesn't just end when the contract ends. Maybe you carry it forward for a period of 2 months, 3 months, until such time as we have whatever it is that we're gonna move to, so that you do have one-shot training.
Right, one.
So it could be that you just extend it. I mean, that may be something that you do. I don't know. I'm throwing out ideas.
Yep.
No. All right. Does anybody have anything else to come before the Board of Selectmen this evening?
Thank you, Mike.
Budget board, any?
I would just ask if there's any other information people need, or questions or comments, if they could let us know. You know, we have the next week before people have to start taking votes, that we'd be happy to get that out to you.
Thank you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn?
So move, so move.
All in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Who's opposed?
Stu, you're up.
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second? Motion to adjourn? All in favor? Thank you for coming out tonight. Thank you very much.
Oh,
Stu,
no.
no.